2nd of 2015. Would that have been your next visit with the Rosenbaums and Millie Place and Layla Daniel?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And can you tell me what you recall about that visit?
Miss came in, Miss Rosenbaum spoke with the girls, just checking in, seeing how they were doing.
And how were the girls doing?
On that visit, they seemed to be doing good.
Were there any injuries at that time?
If I'm not mistaken, that was when Millie had the scratch on her forehead.
Would it help you to review your records to be certain about what happened at that visit?
Sure. Yes, ma'am. No.
I'm sorry,
Okay.
Did you notate any injuries to either of the children on September the 2nd?
Yes, ma'am.
And who had an injury?
That would be Layla.
And where was that injury on Layla?
It was a small bruise on her wrist.
And did you inquire about how she received that bruise?
Yes, ma'am.
And what did you learn? Let me ask you, who did you ask the question to?
I spoke with Miss Rosenbaum.
And what did Miss Rosenbaum tell you?
That it was an incident that occurred while in daycare.
And at that point, were you aware that the girls were in daycare?
During that time, yes, I believe we had spoke about children being in daycare.
And to your knowledge, what daycare were they attending on September the 2nd of 2015?
Bethany. It was a church school, Bethany Christian, I believe.
Was that the same daycare that she had given you the name of on August the 5th?
Originally in August, I believe it was Ola.
Okay. So Ola was August the 5th of 2015.
Yes, ma'am.
And then in September the 2nd, what school were they attending according to Ms. Rosenbaum?
Bethany Christian, I think is the name of the church.
Okay. And after you, during that visit, did you follow up with the daycare as to the injury that occurred to Layla during her time there?
I had called the school to follow up. Well, by the time I had called them, they say that they were not there. They weren't attending that daycare.
And I'm showing you, if a family is sending a child to daycare, how is that paid for?
It depends on the family's situation. Some people are approved for CAPS where the state will take care of the daycare. But if they're able to pay for it, then they pay for it out of pocket.
As a caseworker, are you aware of whether or not the Rosenbaums had CAPS?
They were not approved for CAPS.
Okay. And I'm showing you what's marked as states number 214. Do you recognize states 214?
Yes, ma'am.
And what is it?
Their denial letter.
The state would ask the states exhibit 214 be admitted into evidence.
214 submitted.
Thank you. So to your knowledge, were the Rosenbaums approved or denied for assistance?
They were denied for assistance.
Did you have any conversations, since they weren't receiving CAPS, how they were paying for daycare?
No, ma'am.
But the state was not paying?
Correct.
Now, I asked you in regards to the daycare, do you recall when it was that you followed up with the daycare in regards to the girls' enrollment?
It was the 6th of October.
And tell me, what did you do on the 6th of October?
I called the number given to me. I called to check and see, well, for one, how the girls were doing in daycare with it being a new daycare, and to inquire about the incident that was explained to me by Ms. Rosenbaum.
And what did you learn on October the 6th about the daycare and the incident?
That they were not enrolled at that school.
When you received the information that they were not enrolled in the school, did you ever follow up with the Rosenbaums?
Yes, after speaking with them, I contacted her, letting her know that they were saying that the kids were not enrolled, and asking if they were currently enrolled in daycare.
And what was her response?
That they weren't enrolled due to missing information from me.
And is that the recollection of your conversation with her on the 6th?
Yes, ma'am.
Did she give you any other information about the girls and their daycare?
That currently, I think after that point, they weren't in daycare, and they had arranged their schedules to where one of them would be at home with them.
During the time that the girls were in daycare, either at Ola or Bethany Baptist, did you ever receive any, enrollment or registration from those schools?
I don't remember receiving an enrollment paper or a letter.
Do you recall having any conversation with Ms. Rosenbaum about their registration or enrollment?
At one point, she did say that they were enrolled in a daycare, but however, the process wasn't able to be completed because of missing birth certificate.
And show you this, hopefully to help refresh your recollection as to that conversation, just to highlight the area, not reading it. Well, let me ask you, do you recall whether or not you had any conversation about enrollment and report cards with the defendant?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, do you recall what date that was?
That was, if I'm not mistaken, that one was in October.
Okay. Would it help refresh your recollection as to the date by looking at a document?
Yes, ma'am. September.
Does that help you as regards to the date?
Yes, ma'am.
And what date was that?
Sorry, that one was in September.
As far as report card or enrollment from?
That would have been from Bethany at that point, because she was changing it to Bethany.
Okay. So the initial was Ola, and then they changed to Bethany.
Yes, ma'am.
So in September, what was your understanding as to which daycare they were attending?
Bethany.
Bethany, okay. So I want to make sure I get it right. August the 5th, they were enrolled in Ola, and then in September, they were enrolled in Bethany Baptist.
Correct.
Did you ever receive that registration paperwork or report card from Bethany Baptist?
I honestly don't remember.
Did you follow up with Bethany Baptist in regards to the girls' attendance?
Yes, ma'am.
And what did you find?
That they were not enrolled.
So if they were not enrolled, would you have received a report card from Bethany Baptist?
No, ma'am.
To your understanding, since the girls were not enrolled in daycare, who would be providing care for them?
Either Mr. or Mrs. Rosenbaum.
Was Ms. Rosenbaum working during this time?
She was in school, but she was also interning, I believe.
So when she would be at school, to your understanding, who would be watching the children?
Mr. Rosenbaum.
If she was interning, who would be watching the children?
Mr. Rosenbaum.
And was Mr. Rosenbaum working during that time?
Yes.
And if he was at work, who would be watching the children?
Miss Rosenbaum.
And was Mr. Rosenbaum in school during that time?
I don't remember if he was in school. I think he was just working.
Outside of Ola Academy and Bethany Baptist, were you ever provided any other names of possible daycares that Millie Place and Layla Daniel were attending?
None that I remember.
When was your next visit with, let me ask you, on September the 2nd, did that complete your visit with the Rosenbaums?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you recall anything else from that visit with the defendants on September the 2nd?
No, ma'am.
When was the next visit that you had with the Rosenbaums?
The next home visit, it will be in October.
And what happened during that visit? Let me ask you, in between September the 2nd and October, did you have any communication with either one of the defendants?
Yeah, we communicated often.
Do you recall, is there anything in particular that y'all communicated about prior to you having that visit on October the 16th?
I mean, I'm also not sure, like, she would check in, so we would speak often. I can't.
If not, that's
Just
fine.
nothing that I remember, nothing out the way.
Between that time, what are you doing? Do you ever have the conversation with your supervisor, Tamara Warner?
Yes, we would speak daily.
And when you would talk to Ms. Warner, was there ever a time when you would, I guess, go over your caseload?
Yes, we had staffing days.
How often would those staffing days occur?
Once a month.
And who would be, I guess, present during those staffing days?
It would just be me and her.
And what happened after you staffed, I guess, your cases with Ms. Warner?
Well, it depends on the case, really, if anything needs to be done, anything that I may not have completed or something extra that she would want to be done, but it's mostly updating her on all of my caseloads.
And once you've given her an update, did you memorialize that in any way, or would she memorialize it anyway? Document it?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
And how would that be documented?
She would document it in Shines.
And would there be documentation in regards to the girls in counseling?
Yes, ma'am.
And do you recall what that documentation would have been, particularly in September?
With that, at that time, she would probably put like whether or not they were in counseling, or that they had counseling, how it was going. Kind of just depends on what was going on that month.
And do you recall in September what the status was of the counseling with the girls?
If I'm not mistaken, I don't believe they were still in counseling.
And during this time between September and October the 16th, do you have any communication with any of the biological family members?
During which time?
Between September and October the 16th?
I believe so. Communication could become sporadic between the biological parents, but I believe I did have contact with them during that time.
Do you remember which ones? And if your records are there, if you need to look through it to help refresh your recollection, you can.
Is it? Okay.
Yes.
not seen contacts in this.
During that period of time?
No, ma'am.
Tell me about your visit on October the 16th.
Is it okay?
Do you need to look at the records
Yes,
to help
ma'am.
refresh your recollection about that visit on October the 16th?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, you can. And where would that visit have taken place?
It would be in the home.
And who was present during the times when you would have home visits?
Majority of the time, it would just be Miss Rosenbaum.
Do you recall on September the 2nd whether or not Mr. Rosenbaum was present during that home visit?
All right. And no, he wasn't present.
Okay. In October the 16th, what happened during that visit?
The usual, come in, speak with Miss Rosenbaum, speak with Millie. You know, I have the girls in their room. This is when we were discussing gymnastics.
And what was the discussion about gymnastics?
That she had wanted to put them into gymnastics.
Were they going to be put in gymnastics, or were they already taking gymnastics, according to Ms. Rosenbaum?
At this time, I believe she had already put them in gymnastics.
And when you say they, who are you talking about?
Millie and Layla.
Okay. So to your knowledge, on October the 16th, both girls were in gymnastics?
Yes, ma'am.
And that information came from who?
Miss Rosenbaum.
Do you know, does DFACS pay for activities for the kids if they are in foster care?
Sometimes they will pay for the activities.
Was the Rosenbaums receiving any funds in order to pay for gymnastics for the girls?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Had there been any I guess, inquiry about receiving funds?
That possibly could have been discussed when we were discussing them actually going into gymnastics, because she would have to have gotten approval for them to be put in gymnastics.
She would have to have what?
Approval?
Okay. And did she have approval?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Did she ever receive funds? Did they ever receive funds for Millie and Layla to attend gymnastics?
I don't believe so.
At any point, had Millie's name been changed to Millie Rosenbaum?
No, ma'am.
Did you ever once ask about where they were attending gymnastics?
Yes, ma'am.
Where were they attending?
I don't recall the name. It wasn't far. It was in Henry County.
During that visit, did you notice any injuries or bruises to the girls?
During that visit?
Yes.
Oh, no, ma'am.
Do you recall what time that visit was when you went out on October the 16th?
I'm not sure of the exact
need
time
to-
as you. Oh.
If you need to look to recall, that's fine. While you're looking for that, did you notice, was Layla up and walking around at all during your visit on the 16th? Let me ask you a better question. Unless you
I'm
can
sorry.
answer.
By that point, I believe so, and it was in the morning at 9:30.
Okay. Did Ms. Rosenbaum mention that she was having any issues, speaking of Layla, with either of her legs that day?
No, ma'am.
Prior to October the 16th, when was the last visit either girl had with Peggy Banks?
If I'm not mistaken, I believe they had just had a visit when I went to go see them that day.
When you say just, what day are we talking about? 2 days, 1 week?
That weekend
The weekend of the 16th?
before the 6th. I saw them on the
Prior to the
16th, and they
16th.
had just had a visit the weekend before.
after that visit, was there ever a mention by the defendants that Layla had fallen or hurt herself while at Peggy Banks' house?
I don't remember having that conversation. I'm not sure.
Did the girls appear to be fine to you when you visited on October the 16th?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
After October the 16th, when is the next time you had communication with the defendants?
It probably been like later on that week.
And what was the purpose of that communication?
If I'm not mistaken, it was due to an injury that occurred.
An injury
at the date, to Layla.
Okay. And what was your understanding as to what had occurred?
She had hurt herself while at gymnastics.
And who gave you this information?
Miss Rosenbaum.
After receiving that information, what did you do, if anything?
Well, we just text back and forth. She was letting me know what happened. She was keeping me updated. Once I received the information, I contacted my supervisor to let her know to see if there was anything either myself or Ms. Rosenbaum needed to do further other than just going to the doctor.
And can you tell me exactly what she said about how Layla hurt her leg at gymnastics?
She just said that she had hurt her leg while at gymnastics and they went to the ER.
Did she ever mention that the girls were outside playing in the front yard and that's how Layla's leg was hurt?
No, ma'am.
Did she ever mention that Layla had fallen in a hole at Peggy Banks' house and that's how her leg got hurt?
I remember that story, but as far as for her leg, that it was injured while at gymnastics.
And you said that you reported it to your supervisor.
Yes, ma'am.
And did you do anything else?
Well, we talked that night, and it was like, so she said we would discuss it more in the morning. We talked about it first thing that morning. She wasn't sure of what else we needed to do, past her going to the ER and seeing what the doctor recommended. So we went to, I believe we went and spoke to our admin, but she wasn't there. So we went over to the CPS side to see if there was anything else that we needed to do as far as a report or just document, or because we weren't sure.
Did you have to make a report or document that in any way?
Document, yes, that part we were sure of, but there was a form that we had to fill out.
Did you fill that form out?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Do you know whatever happened to that form?
Honestly, I'm not sure.
Did you ever do any investigation with the gymnastics school in regards to the injury that had occurred, according to the defendants, at their location? Bless you.
No, I did go to the gymnastics building. I went to one of Millie practices. I didn't investigate. I kind of just stood back and watched everybody's interaction and everything, seeing what would be said. I try not to make myself known when I go to one of the child's events.
So did you ask anyone at the gym about this alleged incident that caused Layla to break her leg at Gym Tech?
I didn't.
And you said that they went to the emergency rooms. How, with foster kids, how is medical treatment paid for? Do you know?
It's paid through their insurance.
Okay. And who's their insurance?
A Mayor Group.
Okay. And is that Medicaid?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you recall what day that was when you went out to the gym to see Millie?
I'm not sure of the exact day, but it was still in October, like towards the end of October. I believe.
Do you recall whether or not what treatment was given to Layla as a result of the injury?
That night they put a soft cast on, but then she would have to go in. They had to make an actual appointment to have a hard cast put on.
And did that in fact happen?
Yes, ma'am.
When you went out to Gym Tech to watch Millie's class, where was Layla?
Layla was at the house.
So she didn't.
She wasn't there.
She wasn't there. Did you ever observe or see Layla with her cast on?
Yes, ma'am.
And when was that?
They had came by the office, and I had also seen her in the home.
Did you notice any other bruises or injuries to her during the time that you saw her with her cast on?
Not that I remember. Yeah.
Did you get updates from the defendants as to how she was doing with the cast on?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
And what would they tell you?
That she was doing okay. That of course she didn't like it, and that she was having some trouble getting around with it on.
Were there any reports of any additional injuries as a result of her having the cast on?
They did say that she had slipped on the steps with it.
That would have been during the time, do you recall when it was, it in the beginning, in the middle, or the end of her having that cast on?
That was... It was like kind of like in the middle towards the end.
So she received the cast in October.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know when it was removed?
I don't remember the exact date of when it was removed. I want to say that it was in November.
Okay. So in between October, when she got the cast in November, when did you get phone calls or reports of her falling down the stairs with the cast on? Was it 2 weeks before she got the cast on, or off, a week before?
I don't remember exactly, but I know it was prior to her having the cast taken off.
Okay. After the incident with the cast, when is the next time that you have a visit with the defendants?
That would be November 2nd.
In between October the 16th and November the 2nd, were there any visits with the biological family?
Yes, ma'am.
Who were those visits with?
They were still being done with the mother and the father.
They were having visits?
I do believe they were visiting at that time.
Would that be notated in your records?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Okay. Would it help to look at that to refresh your recollection as to when they would have visits?
Okay. Yes.
After October the 16th.
After the 16th. Just from what I have, Mr. Daniel, I met with him on the 22nd and scheduled a visit for him that weekend.
To your knowledge, did that visit ever occur?
I believe so. I don't remember that visit being canceled.
In regards to Tessa Daniel, did she have any visits during that time?
I believe so. This is a mixture of different counties.
Okay.
So I don't have any canceled, but I believe so.
Did you ever have any conversation with Ms. Daniel in regards to visitation with her daughters?
Did I conversate with who?
Tessa Daniels, the biological mother.
We did. We would speak about visits. I would ask her how visits were going. The most I got from her in complaints while she was present was the phone calls at night.
The visits with the biological parents, if there were any, were those being supervised or unsupervised?
They were still supervised.
At any point, if there had been a visit, do you recall receiving complaints from the defendants about the girls coming back from those visits with bruises or injuries at all?
Not that I recall.
And I was asking you about your next visit. When was that?
November 2nd.
And tell me about that visit.
It was still just a regular visit. I know Layla, I did not see, well, I saw her, but I didn't actually visit with her. She was asleep.
What does that mean? You
What do
didn't
you
actually
mean?
see her.
Oh, I mean, like, I saw her, but, like, I didn't wake her up. I didn't remove any of her clothing or anything.
Okay. Why not?
Because she was asleep. They've been having some issues with getting her to sleep.
Where did you get that information from?
Ms. Rosenbaum, they said she was having issues with teeth coming in, so she'd been really upset, hadn't been sleeping a whole lot.
And how old was Layla at that time?
Layla was, she was still just 1.
In 2015?
No, she was getting ready to be 1.
In 2015, are you certain about that?
Or did she come in at 1?
Would it help you to look at a
So, yeah,
document
she
to
was
refresh your
1.
recollection as to her age?
That's fine. But she was 1. So she was 1. She was getting ready to be 2.
So, does that help refresh your recollection?
Yes,
as to-
ma'am.
As to her date of birth?
Oh, you wanted her date of birth?
Yes.
Oh, I thought you asked how old she was. I'm sorry.
Well, that's how we can figure out how old she is.
Oh, so she was 2.
Oh, thank you. So, did you undress her at all after being told that she was having trouble for sleeping due to her teeth coming in?
No, I did not.
Okay. So, would you be able to tell whether or not she had any injuries or bruisings on her?
No, ma'am.
Was she when you saw her, was she clothed?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And let's talk about Millie. Did you examine Millie?
I did not.
You did not examine Millie?
No.
Okay. Did you notice any injuries or bruising to Millie on that November the 2nd visit?
No, ma'am.
If you could look at would it help you to refresh your recollection if you looked at your visit from that day on November the 2nd?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, you can look at it. Does that help refresh your recollection?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And were there any marks, bruises, or injuries to Millie on your November the 2nd visit?
With Millie, she had a small red mark under her eye.
Okay. And did you ask about how that happened?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
And who did you ask?
I'm asking Miss Rosenbaum.
And did she tell you what happened?
Yeah, she said that she had fell while she was in the tub.
Did you discuss that issue with her at all?
With who?
With Miss Rosenbaum?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
What did you tell her, if anything?
Well, we just discussed what happened. She said she had stepped away for just a moment and that Lily had slipped while she was in the tub, that the water wasn't high, so there wasn't a fear of her drowning or anything like that.
Did you discuss any other issues in regards to the girls with the Rosenbaum? Let me ask you, were both the defendants present that day, or was it just Ms. Rosenbaum?
If I'm not mistaken that day, I think it was just Miss Rosenbaum.
Okay. Did you discuss any other issues at that time, on that November 2nd visit?
Well, during this visit, we had also had the forensic that day, so it was also discussed that Mr.
I'm just going to go into, did you discuss whether or not there was issues, let me try to, with Millie lying?
I don't remember having that discussion, and I don't have anything down, so I honestly don't remember.
Were there any behavioral issues that were noted or discussed or brought to your attention during that November 2nd visit?
Only about Layla. She was still having some aggression.
And was there a discussion about how to handle that?
Honestly, it was just to be patient with her, continue the supervision, and watching her, because that was an issue, that was an ongoing issue.
And when you say Layla having aggression issues, what was your understanding as to those aggression issues?
The same that they were before. Layla sometimes could become physical with her sister, mostly, but this, like I said, that had been ongoing.
During those times when she may become physical with Millie, was there any concerns or any indication that Millie was seriously injured at all?
No, ma'am.
Any broken bones?
No, ma'am.
After November the 2nd, do you have any more home visits or any visits with the defendants and the girls?
No official visits, but like I said, she was stopped by the office.
When is the next time that you had contact with the defendants in regards to Millie Place and Layla Daniel?
That would be the day that Layla passed away.
How were you informed about Layla's death?
Well, I was informed by the doctor.
You said the doctor. How did you end up talking with the doctor?
I went to the hospital.
How did you know to go to the hospital?
I was contacted by Miss Rosenbaum.
And what did she tell you that caused you to go to the hospital?
She said that Layla had been choking. She had stopped breathing. She couldn't dislodge what was in her throat, and that she had called the ambulance.
Did she say whether or not she was ever able to dislodge whatever she alleged was in Layla's throat?
No, ma'am.
Where was she when she called you, if you know?
You said where was she?
Yes.
I believe she was at home. Well, I assumed she was at home.
Where was the defendant Joseph Rosenbaum?
I'm not sure where he was. I don't think he was there.
After she called you, what did you do?
I called my supervisor to see if I had permission to go to the hospital.
And did you go to the hospital?
Yes, ma'am.
And what happened when you got to the hospital?
Once I got to the hospital, they put us in the, I don't know, it was like a little side room. And that's when the doctor came in and he spoke with me and informed me that she had passed away.
Was Miss Rosenbaum or Joseph Rosenbaum present at that time?
Miss Rosenbaum was present. Mr. Rosenbaum, he was on his way.
Were you in the same room with the defendant Jennifer Rosenbaum when the doctor informed you that Layla had passed away?
Yes, ma'am.
So he told you both at the same time?
No, he had pulled me out of the room.
Okay. So after he pulled you out of the room and told you that Layla passed away, what did you do?
Honestly, I went back in and I confronted her with the information that he had gave me.
What did you tell her?
That, well, for one, that she had passed away and that she had several bruises on her lower half.
And what was her response?
I honestly just remember her crying, and she seemed to just be in shock. She didn't say anything about it. She was crying majority of the time.
Did she give you any explanation for those bruises?
No, ma'am.
When she was talking to you about trying to get the obstruction out of Layla's throat, did she tell you how she tried to do that?
I remember saying she was, hitting her on the back.
Did she tell you anything else that she did?
That's what I remember. I remember her saying, she tried to hit her on the back. I don't remember if she said she tried CPR or not. But I remember her saying she was patting her on the back, trying to get it to come up.
After talking with her, what did you do?
After that, honestly, we were in the room. By that point, I had one of my coworkers with me, and at that point, I just took Millie's clothes off, and I checked her from head to toe, and she had a bruise on. I'm not sure what side it was, but on her hip.
And where were you when you undressed Millie?
We were still in the room, in the little side room that they had put us in.
And where was the defendant?
She was still there.
Was she in the
I believe she was. I think she was still there.
Was she in the same room with you where you were undressing Millie?
Yes.
And you said you saw some bruises. State's exhibit number 78 is behind you. Is that one of the bruises that you saw on Millie?
Yes.
And state's exhibit number 80, is that the bruising that you saw on Millie?
Yes, ma'am.
After you saw that bruising on Millie, what did you do?
Honestly, at that point, I had just started crying. And so my coworker took Millie out of the room and took her outside. And by that point, CPS was there, and I was instructed to go home.
Did you ever get any explanation as to those bruises on Millie?
Millie stated that this is before Ms. Rosenbaum said anything, but Millie stated that she had fell while at gymnastics.
And do you remember what day it was that you went to view gymnastics with Millie?
Like I said, I'm honestly not sure of the exact date. I know it was after Layla had injured her leg, so it was in between that time. I'm not sure of the exact day.
Okay. And did you lose your job as a result of this incident?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Nothing further at this time. Well, let me ask you, are you being sued civilly as a result of this incident?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Is that still ongoing?
Yes, ma'am.
Nothing further.
All right, thank you, Michelle. Cross.
Good morning, Ms. White.
Good morning.
My name is Corinne Mullen. I just have a number of questions I'd like to ask you,
Okay.
okay? First of all, just talking about what you just talked about with Ms. Young, do you recall writing a statement at the time that, on the next day, do you recall writing a statement for police?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and in that statement, isn't it true that you said you undressed Millie in private and you spoke with Millie in private?
For when, ma'am?
For when you viewed her at the hospital?
Yes, ma'am.
You did view her in private, and you did speak to her in private, didn't you?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, let's just go back a little bit. What was the plan for this family of Millie and Layla? What was their plan? Was it reunification, non-reunification, or both?
They had a concurrent plan.
Okay, what does that mean?
It means we were still working the reunification plan, and we also had a plan for for termination of parental rights.
Okay, now why did you have a plan for termination of parental rights?
Because at this time, we still were not able to get the parents to complete the case plan. The parents were kind of in and out.
Okay. Now, is it fair to say, Ms. White, that as far as Tessa Daniel, she did visitation once and then didn't show up anymore, correct?
I don't think it was just once. She had a couple of visits
She
with
had a
them,
couple
but there
of-
was a period of time where I was unable to get in contact with her.
And there also was a period of time where she was in jail, isn't that correct?
I believe so. Honestly, not certain.
Isn't it true that she was in jail from September 22nd, 2015 to October 15th, 2015?
I'm not sure of the dates, but I do remember that she had been locked up.
Would it help you to look at a document?
Sure. Yes, ma'am. Sorry.
Does that refresh your recollection?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Okay. Was she in fact incarcerated September 22nd to October 15th of 2015?
Yes, ma'am.
And then there were other times between July and November where you just couldn't find her. She was out there, but you couldn't find her, right?
Correct.
You would go out to the house and there would be signs on the door
Yes, ma'am.
saying, "Do not knock."
Yes, ma'am.
And you would go and knock and nobody would answer.
Correct.
You would call and the phone would be disconnected.
Oh, possibly. I don't remember if it was disconnected, but I know I would call. I wouldn't be able to get in contact with her.
Now, non-reunification involved the girls having a permanent home through adoption, correct?
Correct.
And in fact, termination of rights the offing was going to happen sometime in November of 2015, correct?
We hadn't started the process of terminating their rights.
You hadn't started the process
No,
yet,
ma'am.
but it was being looked at.
Yes, ma'am.
And did you look for relative placement for these children?
Yes, ma'am.
And what was the problem with relative placement?
No one, either they didn't want to or they were unable to take both girls.
And with regards to the relatives, did you check with biological family?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you check with any references that the biological family gave you? Anybody that they said their friends would be willing to take it, or distant relatives?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Now, you initially came on the case when the children were in Loretta Brown's custody,
Yes,
correct?
ma'am.
And at that time, you did not see any bruises or cuts, correct?
Correct.
But then you saw the girls May 12th at the Lamberts, and there were concerns because Millie gets very upset and Layla's begun to hit and pull hair, correct?
Correct.
And you saw, you were told by Miss Lambert, at one point, you were shown the pictures that Miss Lambert showed you about the girls having marks on them.
Yes, ma'am.
And the pictures that you saw, you conferred with your supervisor, correct?
Correct.
And you both decided, you looked at it and decided that the bruises or the marks were healing or had already healed, correct?
I don't remember exactly what we discussed, but we did go over it.
And decided that there was nothing that rose to the level of abuse, correct?
Correct.
And that in fact, some of these marks were healing marks.
Like I said, I don't remember
You don't
all of what
remember
we
that.
discussed, but we didn't believe it was abuse.
Now, you didn't take any pictures of the girls at the Lambert's house, did you?
Correct.
And the bruises, the marks that she saw, you took note of them, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you talked to Miss Rosenbaum about it,
Yes, ma'am.
and you talked to Miss Lambert about it.
Yes, ma'am.
And Miss Lambert felt it was a matter of lack of supervision,
Correct.
not watching the kids while they were playing.
Yes, ma'am.
And it's fair to say these girls were rough and tumble and active little girls, weren't they?
Millie was, yes.
And Layla was also very active, and she got around, didn't she?
Yeah, when she was able to, yes.
Okay. And when children bite other children or pull hair, what is likely to happen in your experience? If a little boy pulls a little girl's hair, what's likely to happen? Is it not likely that a child will be bitten back or hit back by another child?
Oh, sometimes, yes, ma'am.
Okay. And how many children were at the Lambert's house?
Honestly, I don't remember how many children were at her home. But I do know she had other kids in care in her home.
Would 12 seem like too many? Or would 12 be about right?
No, 12 would be too many.
Okay. How many would there be? If you don't know, just say you
I mean,
don't know.
I honestly don't know how many children she had in her home.
Miss Lambert never told you she was concerned that Jennifer was abusing the children, did she?
Correct.
And you saw them on August 5th, 2015. You talked about seeing them at the Rosenbaums, and Millie had a scratch on her forehead.
Okay, yes, ma'am.
And you inquired, and you looked at that mark on her forehead.
Yes, ma'am.
It was a scratch.
Yes, ma'am.
It wasn't a bruise.
Correct.
It wasn't a cut.
Yes, ma'am.
It was the type of scratch you get from falling down, wasn't it?
Yes, ma'am.
And you looked at it and determined that this was the normal type of injury that active kids get into, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And in fact, there was ointment and a Band-Aid on it, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
You, in fact, on August 5th, 15, found that the Rosenbaums were doing a good job. Isn't that true?
Yes,
You wrote
ma'am.
in your statement that.
Yes, ma'am.
And the girls and Jennifer had had a girls' day with manicures, pizza, and a movie, right?
I remember the pizza and the movie part.
Now, you visited the home and you found everything to be in order, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to show you. What I marked as as 129 and see if that, if you can identify that.
This is inside of their home. This is the living room. Like the living room and like leading up to the kitchen.
Okay. And when you say it's their home, you're talking about the
Oh.
Rosenbaums?
Yes, ma'am.
At this time, Your Honor, I would tender 129 into the record and ask if I may publish.
Any objection?
No objection.
Admitted.
Now, that is a set of steps that are in the living room, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Then there's another set of stairway, isn't there?
Yes, ma'am.
The stairway to the second floor.
Yes, ma'am.
The lights can come back up. Now, during the period of time from July until November, you visited quite often. Isn't
Yes,
that
ma'am.
fair to say?
Yes, ma'am.
And you wrote reports on those visits, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And in fact, you said that the girls remained in contact with their families, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you said that Jennifer did a good job with the girls to ensure that the girls remained in contact with their family.
Yes, ma'am.
And you noted that she keeps the biological mother updated when she can,
Yes, ma'am.
and that she provides pictures constantly, right?
Yes, ma'am.
She even sent you pictures, didn't she?
Yes, ma'am.
On 9/2, you saw the children and noticed that the girls were doing well. Layla had a small bruise, you say, on her right wrist.
Yes, ma'am.
And when you say she had a small bruise, how small are we talking about? Like a penny? Smaller?
Honestly, not sure.
You don't remember.
No, ma'am.
You didn't take a picture.
No, ma'am.
You didn't think it was worth taking a picture.
No, ma'am.
It was this type of injury that normally happens in the course of a child's life, correct? Active child's life.
Yes, ma'am.
It wasn't the type of injury that rises to the level of abuse, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And let's talk just briefly about Ola Academy. Wasn't Ola Academy what Jennifer wanted to, where Jennifer wanted to put the kids, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
She wanted to put them there, but was unable to because it's a private school, correct?
I'm not sure if it's a private school, but
But it required payment, correct?
yes, ma'am.
And CAPS would not pay, right?
Correct.
And so she didn't go to Ola because of that, isn't that correct?
I guess so. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, she told you about the children were going to go to Bethany Baptist. She also tell you that the children were a turning point, that there had been a change in churches. Do you recall that?
Honestly, not sure.
Okay, but it's possible.
It's possible. I'm just honestly, I'm not sure.
Now, did Tessa ever voice concerns with you about Mr. and Mrs. Rosenbaum having the children?
No, ma'am.
In fact, she was saying, she testified in court that she saw the girls all the time, and received pictures from Jennifer, didn't she?
I remember her testifying in court.
Let me show you what, see if this refreshes your recollection.
Okay.
Does that
Well,
refresh your recollection?
that I remember. That's the thing. I don't remember anything in court, but I do know that she sent pictures to Miss Tessa.
And that Tessa was seeing, whenever she could, she was seeing the children, whenever she wasn't in jail or wasn't
Correct.
just not being around. Now, you also said that during this time, the girls were hugging on the Rosenbaums and hugging on the Rosenbaum dogs, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
They also loved playing in their room, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And tell me about the room.
A normal child room. They had bunk beds, toys.
TV.
Yep, it was like a regular kids' room.
It was a regular kid's room, but it was fully outfitted, wasn't it?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Okay, so it's not like they just moved in, just the girls, there already was stuff there,
Yes,
wasn't it?
ma'am.
And you wrote that the Rosenbaums appeared to have a sincere desire for long-term placement for Millie and Layla, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And they appeared to greatly love the children, is what you wrote.
Yes, ma'am.
And when you saw Millie, she was very excited to tell you about all the things she had done, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And they were going places all the time, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
They went to the zoo, they went to Hilton Head, do you recall that?
Honestly, I don't remember. I know that they often went places like to, little festivals, the zoo, stuff around the city. They were doing things all the time.
Do you recall getting Jennifer seeking permission to go to Hilton Head with the kids for a summer weekend?
Honestly,
You know,
much. Like, yeah, like a lot of this stuff was a long time ago.
okay. And you wrote that Layla was becoming even more interactive with the Rosenbaums than she had been before, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
She was saying more words every day? Every time you saw her, she was saying more words?
She was starting to say more words. Yes, ma'am.
And Jennifer was working with her on her words and putting them together, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And you noted that the girls are adjusting well and do great in the home.
Yes, ma'am.
You noted that the children were comfortable in the home, comfortable moving around.
Yes, ma'am.
And that's what you yourself saw.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, isn't it true that every time you saw the girls, you would undress Layla?
Yes, ma'am.
And Jennifer was aware that you came monthly and that you would undress Layla, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you ever see anything on Layla or on Millie that said, abuse to you?
No, ma'am.
You noted in September that Millie was very excited. She told you she'd baked brownies and was with a friend of Miss Jennifer's was there as well. Do you remember her telling
Possibly.
you about the brownies?
Possibly. Millie was she was often excited about stuff.
Okay. And when she was often excited about stuff when she was with the Rosenbaums, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Let me show you what I put a tab on here and see if this helps refresh your recollection about the brownies.
objected on what she's asking everything, and she said she could not recall.
She did say about the brownies she didn't remember.
That relates to that issue, that's fine. Take a look.
So I can
You
come.
can take a
Okay.
look and see.
Okay.
Does that refresh your recollection?
Yes, ma'am.
Was Millie excited to tell you about the brownies she had baked?
Yes, ma'am.
She told you about going to Six Flags and riding roller coasters, didn't she?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
And you wrote that the girls were seen by a therapist, right? At some point when they were at the Rosenbaums, you said the children were seen by a therapist. Do you recall that?
They were seen by a therapist.
They were. You remember that?
Yeah, I remember their therapist.
Now, you also remember writing that Layla was able to use the tablet to do certain things, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
They had an iPad that both girls used.
I don't know if it was an iPad, but they had like a tablet that they would play on.
And in October, you visited again and saw no signs of maltreatment, isn't that correct?
Correct.
Correct?
Yes, ma'am.
You said no marks or bruises, and the Rosenbaums are still working on hitting with Layla, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And that she was improving.
Yes, ma'am.
And you said no marks or bruises on the bodies, correct?
I believe so. Yes, ma'am.
And you also said the girls are well fed, no imminent threat of harm, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Children ever tell you, when you were talking to Millie privately, they don't put any food in our bodies? Did she ever tell you that?
No, ma'am.
Did she ever tell you, I'm not getting enough to eat?
No, ma'am.
Did Layla ever indicate to you she wasn't getting enough to eat?
No, ma'am.
Did Millie ever say Layla's not getting food?
No, ma'am.
Now, Millie told you she loved gymnastics and she was learning how to do cartwheels.
I don't remember cartwheels, but I do remember she enjoyed going to gymnastics.
Do you remember her saying she likes to do cartwheels?
That's possible. But I mean, I'm honestly not sure, but that's possible. She was enjoying gymnastics.
Okay. She told you she also helps Layla do exercises when they are at home?
Yes, ma'am.
They did that out in the front yard.
I don't know if it was out in the front yard. When I was there, they were inside.
And you saw them do it? Well, she told you that she did it?
Yes, ma'am.
Which one
Millie.
told you that she did it?
Yes, ma'am.
They did exercises. And she was very excited to tell you about her birthday in October, right?
Yes, ma'am.
At Noah's Ark.
No, when me and her talked about her birthday, I believe it was with her grandmother, well, her great-grandmother.
Her great-grandmother. Her great-grandmother took her to lunch, right?
Yes.
But she also had a birthday party at Noah's Ark, didn't she? That Miss Jennifer put together.
I know she had a birthday party. I don't remember if it was at Noah's Ark or not. I'm not sure about that, but I know they did give her a birthday party.
And you asked Millie, how she likes living with the Rosenbaums, and she said that Miss Rosenbaum, she liked Miss Rosenbaum. Miss Rosenbaum was nice to her.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, each time you visited, you talked privately with Millie.
Yes, ma'am.
Did Millie ever say, you know, Miss Jennifer drinks and then pulls Layla up the stairs?
No, ma'am.
Did she ever say, Mr. Rosenbaum hit me on the back or beat me on the back?
No, ma'am.
Did she ever tell you that Mrs. Rosenbaum need her?
No, ma'am.
She ever say to you, you know, my arm hurts?
No, ma'am.
Either girl ever show you their arm and say it hurts or give any indication of that?
No, ma'am.
Now, on October 22nd, you were notified in the evening by Jennifer that Layla had broken her leg, right?
Could you repeat that for me?
I said you were notified in the evening by Jennifer that Layla had broken her leg.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
And did you talk to any doctors or nurses about that?
Yes, ma'am.
You called and talked to the doctor at the emergency room, Hudson Bridge.
Correct. I'm not sure if it was doctor, but I did call and speak with someone.
Okay. And you specifically asked the doctor if there were any signs of abuse.
Yes, ma'am.
And you satisfied yourself that there were no signs of abuse, correct?
Correct.
You felt comfortable because you talked to the doctor himself, correct?
I spoke with someone there. Yes, ma'am.
But what they told you made you feel comfortable.
Correct.
Now, in November, the leg was still in a cast and there were no signs of abuse, no bruises or markings, correct?
When I saw them, no, ma'am.
Now, didn't you also on November 2nd undress Layla? Didn't you tell Miss Roberson that you undressed Layla?
When I spoke with who?
Miss Roberson, Misha Roberson, defects investigation?
I do not know who that is.
You don't remember?
No.
Okay, you
I don't
remember
speaking
telling-
to that person.
Do you remember telling anybody that you did take the clothes off of Layla on the 2nd?
No, ma'am.
You don't recall?
No, ma'am.
You recall telling investigators that the bruising you saw at the hospital was, you did not see it prior on November 2nd.
Correct.
The bruising that you saw at the hospital on Layla or Millie, you did not see on November 2nd, correct?
Correct.
Now, you talked with Ms. Young about the hitting the head on the faucet. Now, you looked at her head and there was no bruising, right?
Correct.
And the scratch, it was a small scratch, and Millie said it didn't hurt, right?
It wasn't a scratch. It was like literally like a red mark
A red
under
mark.
her eye.
So it didn't break skin.
Correct.
And she had sensitive eyes, didn't she? I mean, they would get red easily.
Not that I remember.
Okay. But Millie told you that it didn't hurt, right? When you asked her about isn't it true that Millie said it didn't hurt?
Yeah, I remember her telling me she was okay.
Okay. Let me see if this refreshes your recollection about that.
Judge, I don't think she said she didn't remember anything.
She did, she said she talked about not remembering whether it was, whether Millie said that she was hurt or not.
She said,
No,
no, she did not. Was her
I didn't hear that, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
I'm sorry, but well, to answer your question,
So-
I said that she said that she.
1 second, please. So you're withdrawing the question?
No, I'm going to ask it a different way, if I may, Your Honor, because I got a different answer.
Okay, let me just inquire. It's just a little after 10:30. We'd like to take a 15-minute break right about now. Is this a good stopping?
Yes, yes.
We're going to take a 15-minute break. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I'm just not sure when I'm supposed to leave or not leave.
Go whatever.
Okay.
15-minute break.
Okay. Can I leave now? Am I getting to go around?